I woke up early, as I did every morning, to the familiar chime of the church bells from the neighborhood. I brewed my coffee and opened my phone to check the news. That's when, almost by accident, my eyes locked onto an image that stole my breath. There was my son, Elias, impeccable in a navy suit, smiling beside a woman in a white dress. Roses, music, toasts, an entire album of wedding photos from Charleston, a wedding I wasn't in because I'd never been invited. A hollow ache bloomed in my chest, leaving me breathless. It wasn't just that he'd married without me. It was the public display of my absence, the way I'd been turned into a ghost before all his friends. I barely had time to process when the phone rang. Elias's name glowed on the screen. I answered with trembling hands, hoping for an explanation, an apology, anything. His voice, though, was ice cold. "I got married, Mom," he said, without a trace of warmth. "I only invited the people who matter. Send the keys to the beach house and skip the drama." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. But no, it was him, my son, reducing our entire life together to a cutting remark and a demand. The double blow exclusion and humiliation hit hard. In another time, I might have crumbled, but something shifted inside me. The beach house on the Carolina coast isn't just property. It's where we spent our happiest summers, where Elias learned to swim amid laughter, where my late husband penned his final letters. That place holds the memory of everything I am and everything I've loved. I hung up without responding to his commanding tone. The silence of the house enveloped me, and as I gazed at the family photos on the shelf, I realized what I'd lost wasn't an invitation, but the bond with my son. Yet, something else was stirring within me, a decision born not of anger, but of the need to protect what truly matters. With the echo of his voice still in my ears, I poured another coffee and knew that the memory of Allison, the woman who had changed everything, would inevitably creep back into my mind. I remember that summer afternoon 2 years ago vividly. Elias arrived home with a nervous smile and a woman on his arm. "Mom, this is Allison," he said, his eyes sparkling in a way I'd rarely seen. She stepped into my living room in a light dress, exuding a confidence that caught me off guard. She kissed my cheeks as if we'd known each other forever, and immediately complimented the aroma wafting from the kitchen. I'd made chilled tomato soup, perfect for the season, and my shrimp and grits, the dish Elias had loved since he was a boy, as I served the bowls. I watched Allison command the conversation with practiced grace. She spoke of her travels, dinners at trendy restaurants, and the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. She was charming, though I sensed every word was carefully calculated. When I casually mentioned spending the morning tending the garden at the beach house, her eyes lit up too brightly. "I've heard you have a gorgeous place on the coast," she said with a wide smile, holding her spoon as if pausing for effect. Elias laughed, proud, and added details of our old vacations, but I barely listened. I was too focused on the intensity of her gaze. After dinner, my sister Clara, who had joined us, pulled me aside as we cleared the plates. "She's not looking at Elias, Margaret," she whispered dryly. "She's looking at your walls." I let out a light laugh, trying to brush off her warning. I didn't want to believe that behind this elegant young woman was anything but love. I was too hopeful about seeing my son happy that night as I washed the dishes. I thought about how much Allison resembled those literary heroines who hide their true motives behind a mask of perfection. I shook my head, convinced I was overthinking. Yet, Clara's words lingered, ready to resurface every time Allison re-entered our lives. A year after that first dinner, I traveled to Charleston to visit an old college friend. We met during the city's spring festival, amid colorful lanterns and lively tents, and she greeted me with a warm hug. Over glasses of sweet tea and the hum of music, our conversation turned to my family. When I mentioned Allison, my friend fell silent for a moment. Then, with an uneasy look, she took my hand. "Margaret, did you know your daughter-in-law was almost married here a few years ago?" she asked, lowering her voice. The groom was a well-known businessman. Everything was set, but the wedding was called off at the last minute. There were whispers of debts, shady deals, even deceit. No one ever knew the full story. I froze. I feigned composure, but a shadow spread quickly within me. It wasn't just the way Allison eyed my walls or mentioned the beach house with too much interest. There was a pattern, and my intuition was starting to scream louder than my desire to see Elias happy. In the months that followed, Elias rarely called. Our daily chats, once sacred, dwindled to a few curt texts a week. Whenever I tried to visit, there was always an unexpected trip or a dinner planned by Allison. Elias spoke of exclusive restaurants in Atlanta, weekend getaways to Savannah, dazzling plans that always revolved around her. I listened patiently, searching for a trace of my son in the whirlwind, but every word sounded borrowed, as if lifted from a script that wasn't his. That night, back at my hotel in Charleston, my friend's words echoed relentlessly. I wondered what remained of the young woman who'd sat at my table and smiled while talking about the beach house. Perhaps it was never spontaneity, but calculation. I went to bed late, restless, knowing that the next time I saw Allison, her gestures would no longer seem innocent, but part of a far more dangerous plot. It was a Sunday afternoon when I opened my laptop to look at photos my sister Clara had sent of her grandkids. By mistake, I ended up on Facebook. And there, amid trivial posts, was an image that chilled me to the bone: my son's engagement party. Glasses of champagne, frozen laughter in snapshots, Allison radiant beside her mother, and in the center, Elias, happy, surrounded by everyone but me. I hadn't received a call, not even a text to explain my absence. I learned, like a stranger, that my son was celebrating one of life's biggest moments without me. Fury mixed with a grief so deep it was hard to breathe. I called him immediately. He answered in a calm voice, as if nothing was wrong. "Elias, why didn't you tell me?" I asked, struggling to stay composed. There was a brief, awkward silence. "It's just their family's way. Mom, very intimate. You know, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." Those words cut like a knife. I remembered the summers at the beach house, when Elias helped me set long tables for cousins and neighbors, proud that his mother cooked for everyone. Now, at a new table, mine was the empty chair. That night, I ate alone some bread with cheese and a glass of wine, while the laptop screen glowed with the party photos. The silence in my dining room was so heavy, it felt crushing. It wasn't just exclusion, it was proof that Elias was willing to mold himself to Allison and her family's tastes, even if it meant erasing half his history. I turned off the light late, a lump in my throat, knowing the worst was yet to come, and that every gesture from my son would now reflect his desire to please her at any cost. Days after that lonely dinner, Clara came to see me. She found me with a tired face and restless hands, fidgeting with the tablecloth as if answers hid in its folds. She sat across from me, her resolve as strong as ever, even after retiring as a lawyer. "Margaret, listen carefully," she said, her dark eyes fixed on mine. "Don't wait for them to come with paperwork. They'll take it. Protect the beach house. Secure it, before it's too late." Her tone wasn't sisterly. It was the voice of a professional, Used to foreseeing the inevitable, I nodded. Though inside, I resisted believing my son could conspire against me. But Allison's smiling face in those photos reminded me that Clara was right. That night, unable to sleep, I turned on a lamp and opened my late husband's old desk. Among dusty folders and faded photos, I found a yellowed envelope tucked in the back of a drawer. I opened it carefully and recognized Henry's handwriting. It was a letter to me, written just before he fell ill. In it, he described an old real estate fraud case he'd testified in as an expert. Among the underlined names was one that made me catch my breath: Larson. The name stood out like a warning from the past. My hands shook as I held the paper. It couldn't be a coincidence. Allison Larson, the woman who'd captivated my son, carried a name that had already tainted our family's history. My heart raced, as if Henry was speaking to me from beyond. Opening my eyes, I tucked the letter away, but sleep eluded me that night. The connection between past and present couldn't be ignored. As dawn lit, Hull broke over Savannah. I knew I had to look beyond Allison's smile and uncover the secrets tied to the name knocking at my door. A few days later, I drove to the beach house. I needed the sea air to clear my mind and, more importantly, to check that everything was in place. As I passed through the gate, I ran into Mr. Thompson, the neighbor who's tended his garden next to mine for decades. He greeted me warmly, but I noticed hesitation in his eyes. "Ms. Margaret," he said, scratching his neck. "A few weeks ago, I saw your son here, with his wife." I froze. Elias hadn't mentioned anything. They came together, but then she stayed inside, alone. I thought it was odd, because I saw her at the desk, taking photos with her phone. Elias was outside, smoking and talking on the phone. The revelation hit me hard. This wasn't an innocent visit or a nostalgic stroll. Allison had walked through my home like someone sizing up a prize. Photographing my papers was more than curiosity. It was strategy. I entered the house with a knot in my stomach. The living room smelled of dust and salt air, as always. But now every corner felt violated. I opened the desk and noticed some documents were out of order, as if touched by unfamiliar hands. Anger surged, but so did a chilling certainty they weren't after memories, but property deeds. I sat by the window overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks with an unchanging rhythm, reminding me that nature is patient and always wears down what tries to dominate it. I closed my eyes and realized that if Allison had stepped into my home to claim it, I needed to act first. I recalled Clara's words, "Don't wait for them to come with paperwork." In that moment, I knew defending my house wasn't enough. I had to turn their trap against them. When I returned to Savannah, I carried a resolve stronger than ever to protect my memories and my home, not just with emotions, but with calculated actions. The first step would come with Elias's next call, 2 weeks after my visit to the beach house. The phone rang. I recognized Elias's number, and my heart, against my will, leapt. I answered, foolishly hoping for a gesture of reconciliation. "Mom," he said, with rehearsed calm. "I'm calling with news. We got married yesterday. It was intimate, elegant, just how we wanted it." I stayed silent for a few seconds, as if my ears needed time to accept what I already sensed. Intimate meant without me. Elegant meant by Allison's rules. Before I could respond, he added, "We need you to send the keys to the beach house. We're spending our honeymoon there." Rage surged from my stomach to my throat. The audacity of that demand was so bold I nearly shouted. But I held back. I'd learned that true strength lies not in a raised voice, but in one that knows when to stay silent. "Of course, son," I said softly. "You'll get what you asked for." I heard his sigh of relief, convinced he could still manipulate me as easily as Allison manipulated him. I hung up and stood still in the living room, phone in hand, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Elias at his first communion, Elias on the beach building sandcastles. It all felt so distant. Then, with cold clarity, I knew what to do. The keys would be sent. Yes, but not alone. They'd be accompanied by a carefully prepared package, a gift wrapped in silver paper with a white ribbon, fit for any wedding. Inside would be no crystal goblets or porcelain plates, but something sharper than any knife the truth. I sat at the table and began sorting documents, letters, and evidence. Each page I tucked into the folder was a stitch in the fabric of my plan. As I sealed it, I felt my anger had found a clear direction. And as night fell over Savannah, I was already imagining the exact moment when my son and his wife would open that package they'd never forget. I spent the morning in silence, curtains half drawn, the table covered with papers. I carefully placed Henry's letter, still carrying the faint scent of old paper that stirred me. Then, financial records where the Larson name appeared, tied to shady dealings. And finally, a dossier of photos and clippings confirming Allison's broken engagements, always with wealthy men, always with suspicious endings. As I gathered everything into a leather folder, I felt I wasn't improvising, but fulfilling something that had been set in motion long before, as if Henry had left me the pieces to complete the puzzle now falling into place. I went to a local stationery store and bought silver wrapping paper and a white ribbon, wrapped like that. The package looked like any wedding gift, meant to celebrate a new beginning. No one would suspect that inside pulsed the ruin of a lie. The next day, I took a train to Atlanta. I walked to the street where Elias and Allison shared an apartment and, without ringing the bell, left the package carefully placed by the door. The beach house keys tied to the ribbon. I lingered a moment, staring at it with a calm that surprised me, then left without looking back. I returned to Savannah that afternoon. I'd barely unpacked when the phone buzzed. I answered, and Elias's voice hit me like thunder. "What the hell have you done?" "Mom," he shouted, "you're sick in the background." I heard Allison's sobs, a sharp cry more of anger than sorrow. I tried to make out her words, but they were a jumbled torrent of accusations. I didn't respond with shouts. I took a breath and, in a calm tone, said only, "I see you've opened my gift." The silence that followed spoke louder than any accusation, and I knew, in that precise moment, that their honeymoon had turned into a battlefield from which neither would emerge unscathed. The news came faster than I expected. The next day, headlines announced arrests in Atlanta for money laundering and fraud. Among the names was Allison Larson. Handcuffed as she left the building, I recognized instantly the one where I'd left my silver package. I wasn't surprised. Clara had pulled strings with financial investigators. And sooner or later, the web of lies would unravel. The TV showed Allison lowering her head, her expression a mix of fury and shame. Elias wasn't pictured, but I knew the blow had hit him hard. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was my son, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a crooked tie. "Mom," he murmured. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I stepped aside to let him in. He slumped into a dining room chair, the same one where he'd laughed as a child, and covered his face with his hands. For a few seconds, I watched him in silence, then said slowly, "Blood binds us. Elias, but dignity is earned." He looked up, his eyes wet and desperate. He tried to speak, but the words choked in his throat. I didn't offer immediate comfort. I let the shame and guilt wash over him like an inevitable river. In the days that followed, the press filled pages with the Larson name, an international corruption network, offshore accounts, inflated contracts. Everything came to light as if the truth had been waiting for its moment to erupt. Every time I saw Allison's photo in the papers, I recalled her perfect smile at my table, and a chill ran through me. Elias stayed at my house, silent, broken, searching my gestures for a sign of mercy. I knew forgiveness couldn't come all at once. It grew slowly, like the vineyards around our beach house. And as the scandal grew, I realized the next step wasn't just about deciding what to do with my son, but what to do with the legacy he'd tried to betray. Months passed before Elias found the courage to return to the beach house. He arrived unannounced, his face calmer, dressed simply, as if he'd shed the need to show off. We walked together along the gravel path to the porch, in silence, hearing only the sound of the sea. He stopped at the front door and, with a hesitant gesture, asked if he could enter. I nodded, but before he crossed the threshold, I said calmly, "Elias, there's something you need to know. This house no longer belongs to me or anyone in the family. Years ago, I donated it to a cultural foundation to preserve this coastline. You were never owners, only guests." He stood still, absorbing each word. His mouth opened as if to protest, but he quickly lowered his head. There was no reproach in my voice, just a truth he needed to hear. The beach house wasn't a prize to be won or a spoil to be claimed. It was memory, and memory had to be protected beyond anyone's ambition. We sat on the porch, facing the Atlantic, painted with sunset colors. I poured 2 glasses of Napa Valley Cabernet, and we toasted in silence. Elias, humbler than ever, confessed between sips that he wanted to rebuild what he'd broken, to restore our bond even if it took a lifetime. I didn't offer easy promises. I squeezed his hand gently, like planting a seed in the earth, knowing the fruit would take time to grow. Dignity isn't inherited, it's learned. And that was the lesson he had to nurture from now on. As the sun sank below the horizon, I realized my true legacy wasn't this house, but the certainty that what gives life meaning isn't sold or given away. It's protected, like the soul. I gazed at the ocean and thought that, at last, I'd closed the circle, with the peace of knowing the most important key had always been in my hands.